This is the Energy Makers Show, featuring the innovators, financiers, and policymakers focused on the global energy demand. Brought to you by NRG, moving clean energy forward. And here's your host, Paul Dickerson.
Hi, I'm Paul Dickerson, and welcome to another episode of the Energy Makers Show. First up today, Stuart Page, CEO of Glori Energy, a fascinating company using microbes to enhance oil recovery. Next up, Russ Capper reports in from the SURGE Accelerator with Sarah Groen, co-founder of SURGE, where they visit with Mark Roberts, founder and CEO of Waveseis, a company bringing proprietary algorithms to the next generation of seismic. All that right after this.
At BKD, we understand the constantly shifting nature of the energy industry. As a national CPA and advisory firm, we serve energy clients from the beginning to the end of the cycle. Our experienced energy advisors serve approximately 300 energy companies in exploration, midstream, downstream, oilfield services, and power production. Plus, we're the largest North American member of the Praxity Global Alliance, which means we can help you wherever you operate. Contact a BKD advisor or visit us online to learn more.
This is the Energy Makers Show, brought to you by NRG, moving clean energy forward. And now, back to the Energy Makers Show with your host, Paul Dickerson.
Welcome back to the Energy Makers Show. Our guest now, Stuart Page, CEO of Glori Energy. Stuart, great to have you on the program.
Thanks for having me this morning.
Well, tell us about the company.
Well, Glori Energy is a biotechnology-based oil service company. So we deploy a biotechnology in oil reservoirs, and by doing that, we increase the amount of oil that comes to the surface in production. And we're fundamentally focused on all of the oil that's left behind. This is conventional oil. This is not the typical shale oil that you hear about today with all fracking
Sure.
and all of those different elements to it. But most of the oil that's developed in the US comes from very traditional, very simple reservoirs. We deploy a technology that activates microbiology that's in the reservoir, and it causes that oil to come to the surface, and that's what we're chasing.
Incredible. So you go out and you find those dry holes, and suddenly you make them wet again.
Actually, it's more than just that. We have done that. We've gone to fields that have stopped producing, that the industry has left behind. But when you're involved in production already and when your oil field is producing, we can make the production better. So for instance, we can increase the amount of oil that's produced, we can increase the life of the reservoir. So a lot more of that oil comes out. One of the things that people forget or don't realize is that 2/3 of all the oil ever discovered remains in the reservoir.
Sure.
So it's a huge amount of oil, and it's global, it's not just the US. The best recovery efforts, most of the oil stays in the ground. And if we can tap some of that resource, it allows us to get more oil cheaply to the surface in a clean, biologically neutral way.
All right, so break down the process. You show up and someone's producing and you say, hey, we can help you economically get more out of the ground. Exactly how does that work?
That's right. So we look at the fluids that are coming out to the surface. So we look at the oil and the water. All oil fields produce oil and water together. We do a biological analysis. So we're looking at the bacteria that exists in the reservoir. We look at the oil. We like to know what type of oil it is and how the oil and the bacteria interact with each other. Our scientists spend a bunch of time in the lab looking at the biology and looking at how we can exercise a technology that activates the bacteria. And the bacteria is activated on the oil. It has to interact with the oil. We develop a nutrient system. So there's a specific ingredient that we then add to the injection side of an injection water flood. And the nutrient goes into the reservoir. It meets the bacteria and it meets the oil. It activates the bacteria, which grows on the oil, which then releases the oil that's stuck in the reservoir. It's a very, very simple process. The technology is very complex, of course, and it's taken decades to actually get to the point where we are today. But the execution is actually fairly straightforward.
Now, so many of these oil producers hear from new technologists saying, hey, we can help in some way. And they say, look, we can't run the risk of using your technology because it may screw up what it is that we're doing. How do you work through those conversations?
Well, that's right. And in particular with biology, very few oil companies have microbiologists present on their staff, so they don't understand the technology from the starting point. And worse than that, there's been a long history of petrochemical engineers and petrophysicists that want to kill the bacteria in an oil field situation, because generally they look at it as something that's negative. It's
Right.
doing things that they don't want it to do. So when we come along and say, we're going to grow bacteria in your reservoir, it's a very, very difficult conversation to start. So we go through an education process. We spend a lot of time talking about how the technology works, why it works. We demonstrate, we show fields where we've been active in the USA and Canada. We show the kind of results that you can expect to see. And then in general, we start to move towards a pilot project, which is a small implementation in a corner of the field, not in the major part of the asset. And that's really how we get the technology adoption to take place.
Fascinating. And you hinted, but where you are working outside the U.S.
We are. We have some projects in Canada right now. We are mobilizing down to South America. We're sending a unit down there this week on a project that we've been involved with for nearly a year now. We have a pending project in the Middle East. We're in the science phase of that project right now. And we very recently, just a couple of weeks ago, signed a joint venture agreement in Russia. Russia's a very interesting environment for us because they have so much production that is candidate for our technology. So we expect to be working with Lukoil in the very near future. And that will be a very interesting project for us. Our field people are looking forward to going to West Siberia and experiencing some of the cold.
Right, yeah, exactly.
I think they're about to learn what vodka's about.
That's right. Well, beyond the chill of Russia, what challenges do you see for the company in 2013?
Yeah, the biggest challenge is always the technology adoption curve from the oil industry. It's always getting enough projects moving quickly enough and getting the adoption curve going. So we're working through that. We've got a bunch of projects in the field right now, and each new data point adds to the momentum, if you will. But in addition, we're actually in the process of acquiring oil fields. So we will be taking under ownership some small, mature waterflood oil fields that we can then deploy the technology in. And we're doing this primarily so that we can create very, very solid case studies that we can demonstrate back to oil companies to help them understand how the technology works and why it works. And it really helps to have projects that we can control, which allows our scientists to interact directly with what's happening in the field. Science is never static, and we always expect to be moving it forwards.
Well, absolutely. And I would imagine that might also be a better business model for the company long term, right? To be producing your own oil.
Controlling your destiny is never a bad thing. And so absolutely, it's a very positive business model for the company. We run it in concert with our business model where we're servicing other oil companies, because these two things are very synergistic and very additive at the moment.
Well, we love a good entrepreneurial story here at TheEnergyMakers. Tell us a little bit more about you.
Well, I've been in the oil field all my career, so this is an interesting departure for me. I joined the company 6 years ago now, and have spent the last 6 years, actually 4 of the last 6 years, working through the technology issues. We've come a long way through our original concept development, through the technology, the research and development to get to the stage we are today. We've created partnerships with institutions and companies around the world to help our research program. We're partners with Statoil out of Norway, the big oil company. We've got a research project going on with Vinogradsky Institute of Microbiology in Russia. We acquired a small group of scientists in Argentina that were additive to our intellectual capital. And we have our roots based in India with a research group in India. So we've literally scoured the world for the best of any work that's been done in this space. And we've pulled all that evidence and that research and development, all that stuff together, used our own scientists to take the rational and the correct pieces of that together and move it forward. And that's how we've built the technology we deploy today. It's got really deep roots around the world. It's been tried and tested in many, many different places and different forms. But the platform we've developed today, Activated Environment for Recovery Oil, the Aero platform, we first implemented in 2010. And we've been rolling that out to different clients now, and we've had some tremendous results. And typically we'll see the oil production in the affected wells go up 50 to 100%. We'll see the decline rate decrease, which extends the life of the field. A project that we have going where we acquired a very small field that was not producing oil. We're now producing oil every month, every day. So lots of things are happening, and our hypothesis, our understanding of the technology is growing all the time.
Sure. Understanding
exactly how it's doing what it's doing, because you can't see this. This is microbiology happening 2 miles below the ground. There's no way to observe it directly. Right. So we spend a lot of time doing lab work to correctly interpret what's happening.
Well, it's very exciting. Thank you for coming by today.
Thanks for having me. Enjoyed it.
And that wraps our discussion with Stuart Page. We'll be back with more right after this.
Welcome to this edition of The Power of People, where we explore how to bring out the best in your most valuable asset. I'm Robin Knowles, President and CEO of TDS, the Workforce Performance Experts. Today we're talking with Melissa Lassiter about giving feedback. Thanks for joining us, Melissa.
Oh, thanks for having me, Robin.
Melissa, which employees really need feedback about their performance?
You know, Robin, all employees do. And that's one of the biggest problems we have with managers is they think that seasoned employees don't need feedback for whatever reason. And it's important to give all employees feedback so they know how they're doing, especially the younger generation, the millennials as some people like to call them. That particular population really likes to know how they're doing and that they're on track.
So why is feedback so important?
Well, I found that job performance really suffers if you don't give feedback. For me, the feedback really gives you some checkpoints throughout the activity, and it helps keep things on track rather than getting all the way to the end and realizing you've missed the mark. And it's very important to kind of give that roadmap along the way so people know where they are.
So when should a supervisor give feedback?
Personally, I think feedback should be done frequently. I tend to err on the side of more rather than less. I like to go through the whole process and give feedback, and then at the end, give some summative feedback that ties everything up so the person can take all those lessons learned and apply those to the next project they're on.
So isn't that too much?
Well, again, like I said, I like to go a little more than not giving enough. The biggest thing is just make sure that the feedback is timely and that it's appropriate for the situation, and that it's perceived by the receiver as genuine and sincere and constructive. That's the biggest thing. Don't just give feedback for feedback's sake. Make sure it has a purpose and that it's received the way it's supposed to be received.
Well, thank you so much, Melissa.
Thanks.
This has been another edition of The Power of People. Join us again next time to learn more about how you can develop excellence in your workplace while getting the best possible ROI from your human capital.
Welcome to another episode of The Future of Water and Unconventionals, brought to you by IHS and CAP Resources.
Hello, I'm Russ Capper of CAP Resources.
And I'm Marcus Gay with IHS.
And our topic today is what's changed. The industry has been using hydraulic fracturing for decades, so why all the recent hoopla about hydraulic fracturing and water usage?
So I think we're seeing two things right now. Those two things are on the demand and supply side. On the demand side, I would say that we've seen probably a 3 times increase in the number of hydraulically fractured wells over the last few years. We're certainly seeing a similar 3 times increase in the number of basins and plays that are actually being explored and seeing active activity today. And then also on the volumes of water that are being generated and being used within the E&P community, that's seeing a 6-fold increase. So there's a substantial demand side response. And then on the supply side, we're seeing a lot of constraints. The regions where this water is being located are often being identified as being under water stress. So there's increased drought as well as competitive use through agriculture, municipal and residential users.
And I think there's also some really community and public perception issues. If you think historically, you think of oil and gas wells out in the middle of nowhere, East Texas, West Texas, not a lot of community impact. But if you look today, even with the first shale basin in the middle of the Barnett, you literally could have activity in people's backyard. And maybe that's where the phrase "not in my backyard" stemmed from. So I think we're much more environmentally conscious of what we're doing in our local communities as well.
So we have a rapid increase in finite supplies challenging hydraulic fracturing today. Check back for more on water management and market opportunities.
And for more information on water management strategies and water market opportunities in the continental U.S., go to ihs.com/waterunconventionals. This is the Energy Makers Show, brought to you by NRG, moving clean energy forward. And now, back to the Energy Makers Show with your host, Russ Capper.
Welcome back to the Energy Makers Show featuring SURGE Accelerator, and I'm joined once again by Sarah Groen, co-founder of SURGE Accelerator. Welcome back, Sarah.
Thanks for having us, Russ.
You bet. Who did you bring with you today?
Today I brought with me Mark Roberts, CEO of Waveseis.
Mark, welcome to the Energy Makers Show.
Thank you for having me.
You bet.
Why don't you tell us a little bit about Waveseis and what you're working on, Mark?
Okay, so just as ultrasound is a key technology in medicine for imaging the human body, seismic imaging is really a vital technique in the oil and gas industry for imaging the human through the Earth. In the 80s and 90s, when they developed 3D seismic imaging, exploration success went from the region of 10 to 15% up to just shy of 50%, demonstrating its importance, especially in today's world where ultra-deep water exploration wells can cost well in excess of $100 million. As with other areas in the oil and gas industry, the easy-to-access technologically oil has been found. And there remain large areas that are underexplored or underdeveloped due to the seismic imaging challenges. At Waveseis, we've developed some proprietary algorithms for providing the next step forwards in our ability to image complex structures. Over the next few months, we hope to produce a production version of this code. We hope to get an industry data set to further demonstrate the value of this technology.
Now, one of the reasons that we actually brought Waveseis into SURGE is because they have an incredible team. So, Mark, would you tell us a little bit about yourself, your background, and the rest of your team as well?
Yeah, so my undergrad was in physics, and my co-founder, he's an old friend from my undergrad days. I decided my head hurt a lot after studying particle physics, and I went on and did a master's and a PhD in geophysics, and my partner stayed on at Oxford and did a PhD in astrophysics. After that, during my PhD, I was sponsored by industry, was working on a data set from the Gulf of Mexico. BP brought me over here, had a great time, ended up working in their research shop just on the west side of town. Bunch of guys who've really pioneered some of the developments in the seismic imaging world. And then I went and worked on an ultra deep water field in the Gulf of Mexico called Atlantis, and been responsible for the last few years on trying to improve the seismic imaging there. And it's really as a result of that and a result of appreciating the value that can be gained from an improved seismic imaging and some of the challenges that are faced day in, day out by some of the businesses operating this incredibly expensive field, that I decided to start Waveseis. So John, he'd been working, after his PhD, he went to work for the most data-intensive telescope ever made called LOFAR in the Netherlands. And he's currently part-time working on leading a team, one of their teams processing huge data volumes to basically build a radio telescope in a computer, essentially, and they just went live. So if you follow the science media, you'll be seeing some of the results from there over the next few years. So
wow!
So our volumes are very large. So his expertise around handling those data volumes are really helpful in what we're trying to do with seismic data. So.
What caused you to pursue and get accepted in the SURGE Accelerator?
To be quite honest, I come from the big corporate world, and I hadn't heard about SURGE, and Sarah actually phoned me up one day, and it's such a great opportunity. Obviously, working in the startup world is very different from working in the big corporate world, and obviously one of the reasons I left the big corporate world, because, I mean, our generation, you hear all about Silicon Valley and the focus and speed with which things can get done in a small company is really hard to compete with in a big company. And so I started my own company, but I really don't have much of the background and the connections that these guys have really been able to provide. And one of our big problems is around computing, and we've had multiple conversations with some really world-class providers of computer hardware, which will help us get off the ground. Not to mention all of the business side of things, fleshing out a business plan, financial plan, go-to-market strategy, things like that at a large company you don't really have to deal with. It's very much some guys hundreds of miles away are worrying about that, and we're focused on the technical side of things. So they've really been helpful in that side of things.
Great. Well, we wish you good luck, and thank you for sharing your story.
Thank you.
You bet, and thank you again, Sarah. All right, and that wraps up our discussion with Mark Roberts of Waveseis. This is The Energy Maker Show, heard on the radio and seen online at TheEnergyMakers.com.